live in a world that I love. When I go to work, it doesn't feel like a job. From a background standpoint, I'm from White Bear Lake. I graduated from Moorhead State with a degree in accounting, and I took really a reverse career path that most accountants take. I worked in corporate America for 6 years. I worked at a little manufacturing company in St. Paul called 3M. And that was a pretty cool experience to see a company that big and see what they have for systems. And so those of us that have small companies, and you look at a big company like that, you look at the infrastructure, the support, the systems they have, and you go, no wonder they can have the success they have. So then I built a house, and I had a bunch of people that were subcontractors on the house, and they said, what do you do? And I said, I'm an accountant. Well, can you help me? Sure, what do you need? And they just kept coming and coming, and you know what happens when you start a business, right? You don't charge a lot, and so you're really attractive because you're cheap. And then over time you go, well, that doesn't work quite so well. So I continued to grow my practice while I was still working in corporate America, and then in 1981 I left Jostens and formed my own accounting firm, so I've done that for 33 years. Along the way, you see all kinds of things, as you can well imagine. There's nothing like experience and a few gray hairs to teach you something. And then along the way, I sort of got into a niche of helping people that were in really tough shape. So I did about 25 workouts for companies that were really struggling, and they'd come to me and they go, I don't have a clue how to get out of this. What do I do? And they're destitute. And you feel bad for them because they're hurting. And their families are, and it's just not a good situation. The biggest one of those was a sanitation company in St. Paul. They had about 25 million in revenue. They were losing 100 grand a month with no end in sight. They'd gone through 5 million in cash, and the guy says, can you help me? Sure. So it took 2 years to turn him around, another year to do a road show. We sold him to a publicly held company for 26 million. He was pretty happy. That felt pretty good. His son and his son's best friend worked for him, and I told those two young guys who are very entrepreneurial that you need to go find something else to do. So they tried a couple of things. They tried baking cookies. They decided that wasn't going to work. Then they decided to get into the credit card business, and they decided that was pretty saturated and not much for margin, not much growth opportunity. And then they got into the ATM industry, where in the old days, anybody here ever like take your checkbook, write it out to cash, go to the bank, get money? Are any of you old enough to remember those days? Glenn did. And so at the time, the banks were the only ones that had ATM machines, and so these guys, they had a machine that was made by Tidal out of Dallas, and it was the clunkiest looking thing you've ever seen in your life. You probably couldn't find one if you wanted to today. And then in April 1 of 1996, the Visa network said, we're going to allow surcharging, and that's the fee you see on the screen of the ATM if you're using a bank or an ATM card from the wrong bank. And those rates are sort of fairly expensive now, right? So little did I know in that company, I was the CFO, I was the oldest guy there. I was employee number 11, and 4 years later we grew by more than 50 million in revenue. That was pretty cool. Talk about not feeling like you're going to work every day. And normally when you have big growth in your companies, you always have financial stress. Where's the money come from to fund this growth? We were the opposite. The more we grew, the better cash flow got. And it was just a cool experience. We did a $20 million private placement with Piper Jaffray. We had all kinds of really cool stuff. And then we eventually sold the company for another 44.3 million. And so that was like the ride of a lifetime. And there's just nothing like growth. So I've been in that arena where you deal with people that are struggling, and you've been in the area where they're growing. Growth is more fun, right? It's positive. It's not negative. So sometimes we get into this position, though, is you know, we probably have all heard the term now, are you working in your business, which means you're sort of a grinder and your head down, or you're working on your business, so you're stepping back to plan where you're going. And the difference is, do you run your business or does it run you? So what are the frustrations that business owners have? Sometimes they feel they're out of control. Sometimes they think there's not enough profit. I'm working really hard, but there just should be more profit. Anybody have that feeling? Right? It does happen. Did anybody get in business to manage people? Isn't it fun? Because all the great ones are easy to find. They don't want to make much, and they want to work really hard, right? Oh, wait a minute. Never-ending battle. sometimes you'll get into a situation where a business will sort of hit the ceiling. They get on some growth curve, and then all of a sudden they get on this plateau where they're going, we just can't keep going up. And what happens when you get in that realm? Margins go down, right? Because competition eats at you. Your people that work for you want to go up. So you have more inflation. And so then what happens to the profit squeeze? It just keeps growing. It's not fun. And sometimes you feel like it's just not working. This used to be fun. I came into this, I had a dream, and now it's just not fun anymore. So what I'm going to talk about is anyone here ever heard of or read the book Traction? Not enough of you. Traction is a book written by Gino Wickman. He's a Detroit guy, and he did a lot of management consulting. And you see a lot of this stuff that's kind of the fad of the month, and you go, okay, how long is this one going to be around? This is a real simple system to help you run your business. It's about goal setting. It's about achieving goals. It's about accountability. It's about a vision. A great tool. So I just want to run you through the EOS model, the 6 components. Number 1, vision. Where are we going? We've already talked about that today. Is it really clear? Do we really know, or do we get up in the morning, we go to work, the first thing we do is we turn on our computer and we start doing this thing with answering endless, mindless emails that probably don't mean anything to anybody. We spend a lot of our quality time doing very unproductive work. Keeps us from getting to where we want to go. People, do we have the right people in the right seats? When I meet business owners, I find that they're really good about not wasting money. They're pretty observant about that, except for that one person that's in the organization chart that probably should have gotten let go a while ago. And they just let them stay there forever. We've heard a number of terms on the data side where what do we need to measure? What do we need to get right in our business to be successful? They're specific. I mean, a lot of them are sort of the same for most of us. But what do we need to get right? Well, then we should measure it, right? Glenn talked about that. And Ricardo did too. If you're not measuring this stuff, you're just kind of going through the motions. And it's so easy for that to happen in your lives, to get away from that crystal clear dream you had on the front end, and now you've gotten a little bit bigger and you're overwhelmed, and now you're sort of at a loss. So we need to figure out what we need to measure to get right. And we all come up with issues. So we want to grow. So we all have inhibitors, right? Do we have enough capital? That's always an issue. Do we have the right people? Can we find good people? Do we have a bank that'll work with us? Because we live in a world where banking is pretty doggone important. Pretty hard to grow without that. And we'd rather have a banker that works with us than a partner that we're going to regret taking on down the road. When it comes to equity, there's only 100%. And the message there is it's really easy to give it away, and it's really hard to get it back. And there's nothing worse than having the wrong partner. It's like being in a bad marriage, right? Fix it. If you can't, it's ugly. Issues are things that keep us from reaching our goals or our vision. We need to deal with them. We can't just ignore them and sweep them under the rug. And we do that because it's easy. Because if we ignore it, we can think about something else. How are the Vikings doing? Who are they going to draft? Not too critical. McDonald's sort of coined the phrase process, or the franchise model came really out of McDonald's having, I don't know, how many stores they have now, 12,000 or whatever the number is. And the idea when you go to McDonald's is what? It's getting the same product that tastes the same serving size. Everything's the same no matter what store you go to in the world. And they really work hard at that. And most people that have multiple locations get it, that you have to deliver that same consistency in whatever you're doing. So on the process side, we want to probably pick out 12 things or something like that in our company we do well. We get a lead. How do we deal with a lead? Some people are pretty aggressive on that. Some people go, well, I'll put them in Outlook and I'll call them 2 weeks from now. In the meantime, 8 people have already talked to them too. So on the process side, what we want to do is define what we need to process, the things we really need to get right consistently. And then on top of that, the next thing we want to do on the process side is we don't want to, these aren't standard operating procedures that we have 4,000 page manual. We're not trying to do that. It's the 80-20 rule, but it's kind of reversed. Let's put 20% and document 20% of the process. These are the high level stuff. Because we sort of need to be able to run our business at kind of 30,000 feet pretty well. And then we want to get everybody to do the same way every time. Is it easy? No. And the more sophisticated your staff is, the more that should happen. The less sophisticated they are, the harder it is for this to happen. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to get some traction. You know, it's sort of the old rubber meets the road kind of a concept. The picture on the cover of the traction book is a tire, right? It's how do we make this work now? Let's get after it. So on the vision side, we have 8 questions we want to answer. I used to think that core values weren't all that critical. We don't need that. We just need to get to work, right? But over time and getting a little more weight here, you realize that understanding what you make decisions about and how you make them is pretty critical. So what are your core values? What do you drive? You know, then all your decisions get made based on what those values are. If one is, we really get after it, then if that phone rings and it's a prospect, what are we going to do? We're going to jump on them just like that. We're not going to put them in Outlook and call them in 2 weeks, right? So defining what those are is pretty critical. Second thing is, what's your core focus? Why are we here? Is it just money? We all do that, right? That's a given. But what are we all about? Where's our passion? If we don't have passion, it's a tough road. There's a lot of Me Too businesses out there where people all do the same thing. You got to stand out. You know, and why do you want to stand out? This is what starts to build your brand. What's your 10-year target? In a small business, that question is probably impossible to answer because so much can happen in 10 years. But if you get to be the size of a company like 3M, they know where they're going to be in 10 years. They can sort of figure that out. It's like a kaleidoscope, you know, and when you turn it, you keep getting a different picture. 10-year targets are pretty tough, but you ought to take a stab at it because it sets the bullseye of where you're going. If you don't meet it, it's not critical. You're going to reset this every year, right? Because that's just what we do. What's your marketing strategy? Did someone talk about that today? That's pretty critical. What's your 3-year picture look like? Now we start to get a little clearer, right? So we're here, 10 years is out here, 3 years is here. And so why do we want a 3-year goal? Because if you don't hit the 3-year goal, there's no way you hit the 10-year goal. You don't catch up. It just doesn't happen unless you're really lucky. So we want to start to get a clearer picture. What are we going to look like in 3 years? And the younger your company is, again, this is still more difficult. As you get a little more experience, this gets a little bit easier. And it becomes a little more fun. What's your 1-year plan? Heck, I can tell you what that is. Rocks. What are rocks? We all know who Stephen Covey is, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has a parable and he says you have a glass cylinder and the things you can put into it are rocks, pebbles, sand, and water. If you do them in the opposite order, they don't fit into that cylinder. And you go, really? Yeah, that's the truth. But if you put them in the right order, you put the big things in first, and then you start to infill from that, they'll all fit. So what are rocks? Those are the big things. What are the big things you need to do in your life to make this work? And we talk about rocks on a quarterly basis because we can say, okay, we've got a 10-year goal, a 3-year goal, a 1-year goal, and then what's the one underlying thing we know about business owners? You can't stay focused on one set of goals for a year. That just doesn't happen because she's shiny stuff. And we're going this direction, and we go, that looks pretty good. Let's go over here. And we see something over here. And we keep deviating, so we get to the end of a year. What have we accomplished? Very little. And we go, how'd that happen? We were so focused at the beginning of the year. What happened? And what are the issues? So how do we define what they are? What's going to stop us from getting where we want to go? And the issues also can be opportunities. Carla said, I did an acquisition or a merger. That's an opportunity, right? We get into different product lines. We find out that there's something else that somebody is doing that we could do, and we can do it better than them, right? We can all do it better because we're smarter. And then here's the big thing. In your company, when you have a vision, the biggest thing that happens on a consistent basis, we don't tell anybody. It's a secret. We don't want them to know what we're trying to do. If you've got staff and they don't know where you're going, and you don't tell them, that you're really doing a disservice to those people. So the critical part about knowing this is you want everybody on the same page. We've all heard that line a million times. So tell them, tell everybody. Have a way to publish this in your company on a consistent basis. People. There's an analogy that Jim Collins described in his book, Good to Great. And by the way, do yourself a favor. Read incessantly. Get smarter than your competition. 7 Habits is a book everybody should have read. Jim Collins on Good to Great, where he talks about what's the difference of how a company went from being good to being great. So his parable in his book is about a school bus analogy, and you probably have heard this at some point in your life, where you have to get, in your company, you've got to get the right, or excuse me, you have to get the wrong people off the bus. We all have them at times in our lives. The first time we hire somebody generally isn't the best hire we make. The second thing is we got to get the right people on the bus. And the third thing is we got to figure out where to have them sit on the bus. And then we have to then figure out where to drive the bus. When I was at the ATM company, when I was employee number 11 and 4 years later we had 120 people. I mean, you could stand by the front door and watch people walk in. And our turnover rate was like nothing. Right? Because we built a great culture and we were really fussy about who we let in the front door and who we let stay. The old days, you used to hire people for technical expertise and you'd want to teach them the soft skills. And I said, you know what, we're not going to do that. That's kind of old school. We're going to hire people that are a right fit. We're going to find them, and then we're going to figure out what to do with them. We were probably 15 years ahead of our time. And we had an amazing culture. So we get the right people, and then we have this thing called a people analyzer. You go, what the heck is that? We got to figure these people out. So we say, here's, and along the top you'll see these are our core values. So then along the side we put in the names of the people. And then we evaluate them and we say, Sally Jones, is she humbly confident? Yep, she gets a plus. We need to be objective about this, not emotional. So we continue to draw our people. Sally's a rock star. John, ugh, you didn't get any of them. Bye, John. George, he's got some pluses and minuses. Then we have to set the bar, right? Do we always set the bar high enough, or do we just let people do whatever they feel like doing? Do you want a good company or a great company? So right people, put them in the right seats. Understand what they're capable of doing. Tom Kelly was the manager of the Twins in the 87 and 91 World Series. And while he was here, you'd see pitchers come to the Twins who are at the end of their careers. And you go, how come he keeps bringing these old guys in? And the reason that people came here is Tom Kelly knew how to do this. He knew how to put that pitcher in the right position to be successful. He understood the value of that. So Jack Morris comes in here and he's just in the 91 World Series, he throws a 10-inning shutout. He didn't wear these guys out who were sort of already worn out. He got that. He knew what they were capable of doing, and he knew what they were incapable of doing. He was pretty honest. And he won 2 World Series. Is there an analogy there? So we talk about, everybody here has heard the term organization chart, right? This is called an accountability chart. So we have a sales, and these are sort of the C-level people in a company, people at a higher level of the management team. So we have sales marketing, we have operations, and we have finance or accounting. And so when we build the accountability chart, yes, you know accountability is going to come here someplace, right? Because it's got a different name. So we have this chart and we say, okay, let's figure out first what this should look like. And please don't put anybody's name in there right away. This starts from a theoretical organization chart of how we run our company. So we want to be pretty critical about what this looks like. An integrator. What's an integrator? That's the person that's got to take these three lower buckets and get these people to work with synergy and to work together, not having three silos out there doing their own thing. This person is really like a general manager, could be a president, generally not the founder of the business. That's that guy or girl. A visionary. You think, what's a visionary? I go to seminars out of town. I come back to my office. I've got 20 new ideas. Jordan that works for me, who is my primary support person, will go, oh no, here he comes. Because she's got to figure out which 2 ideas of the 20 are good ones, right? And she knows she's going to be implementing because she's the integrator. So the visionary's role is generally the founder. You generally don't hire this skill. Some companies may not have both a visionary and integrator role if you're smaller. But the visionary's role is to do what? It's to dream. It's to create a vision. Where are we going? How do we get there? And you want to just turn them loose. And visionaries, they generally make lousy integrators. They don't relate well to the nitty-gritty, the details. The visionaries, they want to live at 20,000 feet. And as a business owner, you need to get into that role, even if you can't do it full time. You need to have time away to take a break and figure out, is this working? What can we do better? So then by each function, because the slide before looked like an organization chart, right? We've seen a million of those. That thing that people create, and then 7 years they go, do we still have one of those? Because they don't use it as a tool. What this does is it puts deliverables by every slot. So from your sales manager, what's that person's role? Are they here to build an organization? Do they need to find reps? Do they need to train them? Do they need to be involved in pricing and those sorts of things? What are we going to hold that sales and marketing manager accountable for? Because setting the vision created the challenge to the company and what we're trying to do. Now we're trying to figure out who has to do what in order to make that vision come alive. These are 3 of my favorite initials, GWC. So you're talking about this individual and you say, does the person get it? Did they get what we're all about and what their role is? Number 2 is, do they want it? Do they want to be a part of this? Or are they coasting? And 3, they have to have the capacity to do it. If you're 0 for 3 with GWC, or 1 for 3, or 2 for 3, you're gone. You're out. If you want a dynamic company that you really want to grow, we want to look for people that are GWC. We don't want to settle for whatever we can find. So we're raising the bar pretty high. And the companies that do this, can you imagine what Apple was like when they got founded? Do you think they would let anybody that wasn't GWC work there? The peer pressure would drive them out. Because everybody identifies who the non-performers are. And if you have a team that's built up of people that are GWC, guess what happens? Your job's a whole lot easier. Managing people, they'll manage themselves. So we've got the people analyzer, so guess what? We got to see how they relate to GWC. If they're yes, 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 they're good to go. And then what do we want to do with those people? We want to really reward them. We want to give them a reason to stay here. On the data side, we've heard of terms like balanced scorecard, we've heard of scorecard, we've heard of key performance indicators. Lots of people do this. In the traction world, we want to take 5 to 15 things that we need to get right in our business. I think 15 is a lot, but what are the things we're going to measure on a weekly basis to make sure that we stay on task, that we don't drop the ball, we don't get into this no man's land where we're just sort of going through the motions. And if you measure these things and you look at them with your management team once a week and everybody knows what it is, you begin to see problems right away. Or if you have opportunities, we also want to start to measure those things. If we want to grow, we need to make sure we're staying on task. What would they be? Here's a few items that you might decide to measure. So they are measurables. There are things you can measure, not, we'd like to have better customer service. Have you ever heard that in your company? We'd like to have nice customers. You know, things that you can't measure, don't try and track them because they're not measurable. What measures gets rewarded. Issues. We want to create an issues list. What do we need to fix here? What do we need to get better? And on the issues list are also, where are there opportunities? And we want to deal with these things and solve them, right? So we have a mnemonic, IDS. Identify the problem, the real problem, because it's like peeling back an onion. And once you peel back the onion, you get to the point where you start to see what the real problem is. Well, John Doe is not performing well. Well, maybe there's something behind it. Let's find out. And then let's discuss the issue in a management meeting, and let's make a decision. How often in companies do we put off making decisions until it becomes so unbearable that that now we're panicking. We just got to make a decision, and then we generally don't make great decisions when we're in a panic. Discussing is a critical piece. Let everybody speak, and this is at a management level. Process, we talked about having them documented. So what are our people processes, marketing processes, and so forth? And that we make sure everybody follows the process so that we're consistent like McDonald's. And finally, the last piece is traction. We've talked about rocks. And then as part of the traction process, one of the pieces of traction is that we have what are called level 10 meetings. How many times do you have a meeting and you go, man, that was a waste of time? Right? It happens all the time. Because we're not focused, we don't stay on task. And so what a level 10 meeting talks about is we have an agenda. So number one, we have a 90-minute management meeting once a week, same day every week, same time for starting, same time for ending. We start on time, we end on time. And we talk about good news. So we're starting off going, let's get in a good mood about this, right? And we talk about our scorecard. What are we looking like? We talk about our rocks. And these rocks are 90-day goals because we work 90 days at a time in terms of trying to establish things. What's going on with our people? Anything new? Someone get married? Whatever it might be. What's on our to-do list? What do we need to get done in the next week as a management team? And then we do the IDS thing, right? Let's get into our issues. Let's solve them. Let's move on. And then we conclude. And we have an agenda like this every week, and we follow it to the letter of the law. And it helps us. We know we're going to get out on time. We know we're going to deal with difficult issues, and we're going to keep moving on. So these are the 6 components of traction. The website for EOS is eosworldwide.com. If you go to that website, they've got a bunch of free tools. The first one's a vision traction organizer. It talks about these 6 key components. And the neat thing about this is you can go into the website, you can find that document, you can type in it, and it saves it as a Word document. So then you can change it as time goes on. Because we're going to create one of these every 90 days. The accountability chart, we talked about that. Rocks, level 10 meeting, scorecard. And that's it. So I would say, read the book. Most people get to about page 30 to 50, somewhere there, and they go, but once you get it, you'll be hooked on this process. And it's just logic. There's no magic in this, right? You can just probably see anything that was really that seemed to be that magical. But it's a proven process to help you run your company. People that do this, I think, average like twice the revenue growth of companies that don't do it. So as that's been tracked, it's highly successful. And you'll go through this, and the first time you go through it, you need to involve your management team. And a lot of people can self-implement this. There are implementers in town that can help you do this. But if you just read the book, you can do a lot of this stuff yourself in your own company. And you'll get something out of it, and you'll probably start to feel like, I really am getting traction. And it's fun. Because we all want more success. A lot more. And thanks.